Hello and welcome to La Excellence Hyderabad and Bangalore. This is the daily news analysis for 30th April 2020. Before we move into today's discussion, there is a small announcement to be made. An NCRT Foundation course is being launched to provide a solid base for the students in order to understand the concepts better when they go and attend the regular classes. And for the PCM 2021, there is an orientation session, the date for which has been listed here, and the mode of the session is going to be online through Zoom class. Everybody who is interested is welcome to participate in this. For further information, you can contact the numbers that have been given below. And now let's move on to our discussion. The important articles of the day have been divided into two parts as usual. We have the daily editorial enrichment program consisting of the editorial articles, and the rest of the important articles have been clubbed under targeted news analysis. Please have a look. Now let's move on to our discussion. So the first article for the discussion has the following title: Afghan Peace and India's Elbow Room. The issue and dimension have been listed here, and the syllabus connection has also been listed here for your benefit. Please have a look. This article essentially is related to the recent peace talks that have been conducted in which India has been sidelined. Now let's look into the discussion of this particular article. Afghanistan, as we all know, has been under turmoil for quite some time. This is because of the terror elements that are there in Afghanistan. This is one reason. And if you want to handle terrorism or any kind of internal disturbance as such, you need to have a strong internal government. But this is also not there in Afghanistan. Like for example, the democratic government that is there in Afghanistan has multiple centers of power, because of which the governance is not as good. Therefore, the terror elements are thriving on one side, and on the second side, on the other hand, the democratic governance that is provided by the government of the day is also quite inadequate. So the situation in Afghanistan has been difficult for quite some time. So in this situation, people, as in different countries globally and regionally, have been trying to come forward in order to bring back peace in Afghanistan. And in order to do so, people or global players have been trying to conduct talks under different formats, Heart of Asia Conference, etc., etc. Like this, different formats of conferences and conclaves are being held in order to bring back peace in Afghanistan, in order to bring back good governance in Afghanistan, because stability of Afghanistan is important for the stability of the region because of its strategic location. So in this context, UN Secretariat has recently started a new conference or conclave called the 6+2+1 group. And this group does not include India. So there is a prelims question which asks whether India is present or absent in 6+2+1 group. India is not definitely present in this 6+2+1 group. Now we will look into the reasons why India is not present in this group. And before we do that, we have to know the countries that are present in 6+2+1 group, because this could be important for our prelims. So what are the countries that are present? Let us list them out. First, 6+2+1 may 6 includes the 6 neighboring countries of Afghanistan, which are essentially China, Iran, Pakistan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. In addition to this, 6+2 may 2 includes the global players, which are United States and Russia, and the last one, the number 1, includes nothing but Afghanistan. So this is basically the 6+2+1 grouping that has come into existence in recent times in order to bring back normalcy and good governance into Pakistan. Now that is on one side. The second part of this discussion is why India has been excluded from this kind of grouping. The reason given for the same is that India does not share a border with Afghanistan as such, so India does not have a major stake with this kind of grouping. This kind of 6+2+1 grouping is what these players are trying to tell us, but that is not the case. That is what this article claims. Essentially, India has a good amount of stake in Afghanistan for several reasons. Firstly, India is close to Afghanistan. India does not share a border with Afghanistan, but it is very close to Afghanistan, and instability in Afghanistan can percolate into India as such, because there are certain terror outfits in Afghanistan which are backed by Pakistan, and with the help of Pakistan, these terror outfits can definitely destabilize India. So it is in the the interest of India to participate in the affairs of Afghanistan. That is the first point. And secondly, India is basically an upholder of democracy as such, and India has been trying to provide good amount of money and resources to the people of Afghanistan, to the government of Afghanistan, in order to improve the situation in Afghanistan. Do we have examples regarding the same? Of course, yes. If you look at the amount of money that India has been spending in Afghanistan, it is to the tune of $3 billion. It is to the tune of as high as $3 billion. We have been spending this money in different infrastructure projects that are there, in different construction projects that are there, and in order to improve the situation in Afghanistan. So, firstly, we have invested money, and secondly, Afghanistan is important for India because the terror element could percolate into India, and thirdly, there are several projects which India has in the region which pass through Afghanistan. Like, for example, if we want to construct our Tapi pipeline, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iran, India pipeline, in that case also you need the Afghanistan. You need to be present in Afghanistan. In addition to this, if you want to work for your Chabahar port, once you construct it, you are supposed to use your Chabahar port to connect to Central Asia. That is one of the main motives of Chabahar port. But in order to connect yourself to Central Asia, you need Afghanistan, because Afghanistan is between Chabahar port and Central Asia, and you need to move through Afghanistan. So there are several infrastructure projects in which Afghanistan happens to be the linchpin, because of which India is also interested in Afghanistan as such. So what are the other kinds of help India has been trying to do in relation to Afghanistan? Firstly, we have tried to build the Salma Dam, which we call it as the Friendship Dam in recent times. It has been renamed as the Friendship Dam. In addition to this, if you look at the money that has been pumped, I've already listed it as about $3 billion. In addition to this, we have also trained the Afghan National Army, so that these people will be able to, as in this army will be able to handle the terror elements at home. In addition to this, we've also trained their bureaucrats, and in relation to the health of Afghanistan, health indicators of Afghanistan, we have been trying to provide Afghanistan with different kinds of vaccines that are there with the help of doctors, and we have also sent some doctors missions so that these people will go there and help the people of Afghanistan. So, if I look into the number of ways in which India is trying to engage with Afghanistan, it is basically quite numerous. So, the article claims that India has a good amount of stake in Afghanistan, and these people, these 6 plus 2 plus 1 grouping, excluding India from this particular grouping, is not really good. It is not really in the best interest of the region, is what this article is saying. So, one reason why India is being excluded is because India does not have a boundary, but there are several other reasons. One other important reason is that India is extremely siding with Mr. Ghani of Afghanistan. India is quite supportive of Ghani, President Ghani of Afghanistan, and this is creating some problems. That is because the democratic nature of Afghanistan is such that all the support is not in relation to Ghani itself, as in all the people are not behind Mr. Ghani. So there are some people who are also in support of the chief executive, Mr. Abdullah, and there are other frittered elements. So India, if it supports only Mr. Ghani, then India might not have the consensus or the support of the people of Afghanistan as a whole. That is one reason. So these people are not willing to have India in this particular grouping. That is one reason. In addition to this, the presence of Islamic State Khorasan province, this is a terror group which is there, and this is basically supported by Pakistan in order to destabilize both Afghanistan and India. So Islamic State of Khorasan province is also another reason why India is being sidelined. That is what this article says. So because of these reasons, India is being sidelined from the 6 plus 2 plus 1 grouping, but it is not wise, is what this article claims. So now it moves forward to tell us what the solution is. So firstly, we've started out by saying that India is not a member for so and so reasons, and then we have said that it is really important for India and the region so to include India in this kind of grouping. And now we'll move forward and talk about the way forward, that which the article is trying to tell us. Firstly, this is the situation of crisis of novel coronavirus, and we are supposed to utilize it. There are reports that India is being able to develop certain kinds of vaccines. In addition to this, we are building masks. We also have stocks of hydroxychloroquine and so on. All these supplies can be given to Afghanistan to build goodwill with the people of Afghanistan as a whole. That is one thing that we can do. In addition to this, India can play a mediatory role between Iran and USA, By bridging the gap between Iran and USA, India will be able to bring in peace on Afghanistan. Because Iran and USA, as we all know, are always at loggerheads at any issue. And with respect to Afghanistan, if India is able to bring consensus between Iran and US for the good governance of Afghanistan, it is going to be in the best interest of Afghanistan. This is the second thing that India can do. And the third thing which India can do is to enact right kinds of laws. Like for example, we have enacted our citizenship amendment bill, which was discriminatory to the Muslims of different countries, especially the neighbors. And this has created some amount of uproar in Afghanistan, and this is not good in the long run, is what this article is trying to say. So it is best to avoid such kind of legislations which will hamper our relations with our neighborhood. So these are the way forward for India to tackle the issue as such. Now this is the gist of this article. Now we'll move forward to look into the next article. So the title of the present article is Coping with Today, Planning for Tomorrow. The syllabus connection, issue and dimension has been listed here for your benefit. Please have a look. This article essentially is related to the way in which we have to plan ourselves when the lockdown ends. Now let's move on to the article and its gist. So India has been strictly enforcing lockdown for about 30-35 days now, and this has basically flattened the curve of coronavirus. If you compare the curve of India in terms of the cases that are increasing, the increase is basically very less in India compared to the other countries that are there. But this article says that we shouldn't be totally overjoyed because of this. Sure, we have made some progress on controlling corona, but the real challenge starts once the lockdown is lifted. And why is that the case? Once the lockdown is lifted, there is going to be a lot of movement. Especially the migrant workers that are there, they are going to go back home. Even now, the government is basically trying to take measures in order to bring back the migrant workers home. In addition to this, the students are going back home. There is going to be a lot of commutation. Because of all of this, there is going to be a lot of movement, and there is possibility of a spread of virus. Also, in 1 or 2 months, once the rainy season starts, that is the season of flu, a lot of people are going to catch cold, and in that situation, the possibility of a corona spike is always there, is what this article is saying. It says that the real challenge therefore starts when the lockdown ends. In such a situation, what are the steps that we have to take, is what this article is trying to tell us. We will quickly list them out. First is to invest in the concept of community education. We should be able to educate our community to use the norms of social distancing, to cover their faces and to sanitize their hands and so on as frequently as possible in order to prevent themselves from being infected by this disease. In addition to this, all this kind of community education and all the measures that are being taken, they cannot be just done by the government, because the government itself has several other responsibilities to take care of. In such a situation, community participation is also important in order to handle the situation. With the help of community, the government can provide good amount of awareness, which can percolate into the rural corners of the country, into the remote corners of the country. The next thing India needs to do is to build trust with the government. Like for example, at the moment there is a good amount of trust with the government, in the sense that people are believing that India has been able to control the coronavirus pandemic to a large extent. It is important to continue with this trust. It is important to build upon this trust, and we also have to build a robust public health system, and in order to do so, we have to invest more in the public healthcare system. So when the corona cases increase, we should have separate quarantine wards, we should probably have separate hospitals to handle them. We should also create some amount of post corona program to remove the stigma these people face, and so on. In addition to all these things, India also has to maintain a strict surveillance. Whenever a particular region or a particular pocket in the country is going through a good number of corona cases, or there is a slight increase or a spike in corona cases, we have to immediately point out that particular hotspot and then take measures. And in addition to all these things, there is a responsibility that is also bestowed on the media. Media should be reporting the cases as they are without inflating them artificially, because that would create panic among the people. So these are the steps that India has to take in order to handle the situation. In addition to this, we have to see what the way forward is. We have seen what steps that India has to take in order to handle the situation. The article gives a few more sets of measures. Firstly, we have to conserve our earth resources, and also we have to avoid our future pandemics by conserving the resources, by restricting ourselves in certain areas without basically encroaching upon the areas of the animals. Like for example, the basic man animal interaction is what has created corona, is the thesis or is the theory. So we have to respect the areas that are being occupied by animals without encroaching upon their areas. That is one step. And secondly, we have to look at this crisis as an opportunity. We should not look at post lockdown scenario is a situation of return to normalcy. We should not look at it as a situation in which we are going back to normal, but we are supposed to create a new normal. And this new normal is a situation in which India radically alters the way in which it handles the pandemics. India radically focuses on community participation, community education. In addition to this, we conserve our resources in a big manner and focus on physical as well as mental well being of people. Basically, India should move to a situation where it addresses the issue holistically. It should look into the one health approach and look into the health of people, animals, plants, and so on. That is how India should conduct itself. Now, let's move on to the next article. The title of the present article is Limitations of Online Learning. The syllabus connection, the issue, and the dimension of this article has been listed here for your benefit. It is related to the limitations that we have when we pursue online learning as such. Now, let's move into the discussion of the article. Now, because of lockdown, world over, different universities or schools are trying to engage their students through the online mode. This is something that we all know. In fact, major universities in the country are trying to provide courses online. In addition to this, we also have massive online open courseware programs like NPTEL, CDEEP, etc. etc. Swayam platform. All these are ways in which we are trying to provide good amount of courses, especially higher learning courses, to people of our country, even if they belong to the remote areas of the country. So definitely there are certain advantages by providing education to people through online medium, because in this way we will be able to touch a lots of lives, we will be able to touch millions of lives. This is a good thing, but this is not a replacement of the regular education. Regular higher education is what this article is trying to tell us, and in order to do so, it is basically trying to identify certain problems that are there with online education. Firstly, it provides access to education, which is fine. Everybody with an internet connection will be able to access the classes that are there, but mere access is not the same as providing good teacher student connect. This is what this article starts out by saying, because providing online courses is one thing, but ensuring the participation of students in the course as such, ensuring that the students receive certain learning outcomes by the end of the course or by the end of the lecture, is definitely really difficult in an online platform. Compare this with the regular educational classes that we have. When we go to a lecture, sit in the class, there is some amount of engagement between the student and the teacher. The student can ask doubts for which the teacher responds. In addition to this, the teacher probably gives the student some quizzes or tests to make sure that the student learns what is being taught. So this is not usually present in online education. That is one reason or one limitation. And the second limitation is the very concept of digital divide. Still, there are a lot of Indians, especially in the tribal pockets and so on, who basically do not have an internet connection. In this context, if we provide online education, these people will not have access to learning, is what this article says. In addition to all these things, there are certain students who are basically very poor at academics, and these people need extra effort and special effort. This is usually possible in a regular classroom module, because the teacher usually singles them out. The teacher basically provides them with extra care and extra focus so that they will be able to get good grades. That is not possible in online learning, and this demoralizes them. If a student is not academically well off and he is not doing well in a particular online course, he does not have the incentive to continue. He simply will drop out of the course, is what this article says, and that is definitely not good for education. Access is not the same as retention. Providing online education, online access is not the same as retaining these students throughout the course, and providing them with learning outcomes throughout the course, and make sure that they will be able to apply whatever they are learning after the end of the course. That is not possible in online learning. In addition to all this, there is one important factor which we are missing out when we provide online education, that is the group dynamics. When a student basically sits in a group, he probably works in a team. If there is an assignment, 3 or 4 students come together, put in their minds, and they will be able to solve the assignment by putting in effort. This is not possible on online education. And if there is a particular project that has to be completed by a group of people, these group of students will not be able to coordinate themselves well if they are not physically close to each other. This is another problem in relation to online education. So relative isolation of the student from his peer group and from the teacher as such is going to create a situation in which he probably will drop out of the course. This is the limitation of online education. In such a situation, we should basically create a balance between these two things. Like for example, at the moment, until COVID situation basically comes into normalcy, until and unless the whole economy and the whole country is totally normal, we might not be able to conduct regular classes. Until then, online classes are fine, but we also should provide them with regular classes once this COVID pandemic comes down. This is what this article tells us. Now let's move on to the next article. The title of the present article is A Greater Impact on Women. The syllabus connection, the issue, and the dimension have been listed here for your benefit. Please have a look. This article is related to the way in which women are facing larger burden in relation to lockdown because of increased responsibilities. So, because of the 35-day lockdown that has been enforced in the country, the whole families are basically staying closely knit in their own houses, and this is creating a lot of pressure on the women of the household. This is the basic premise of the article. And one, because they are staying at home, the men of the household, the old people of the household, the children of the household, all the care work that is related to these three people, the men, the children, and the old people, these three kinds of people, all this kind of burden is basically overburdening women. So women usually take care of the care work, but because these people are staying home, cooking for them, cleaning for them, and taking care of the children, all these things are creating extra burden for women. In addition to all these things, if she is a working woman, she does not get enough money because she's not going to work because of COVID lockdown, but she's staying at home, she's doing even more work than she usually does, but she's not getting paid for it because it is basically counted as care work. As we all know, care work does not get accounted for in terms of monetary outcomes. Now, in this situation, a set of problems are basically plaguing women. Firstly, there is a loss of pay because they are not going to jobs. And even after lockdown, there is a situation that women will be paid less. They will be underpaid compared to their male counterparts because the economy as such won't do well because of the COVID lockdown. And so, women will be paid less compared to the men. That is another problem that they're going to face. In addition to this, the care work, which we have already mentioned, is going to continue, and the older people who probably will fall sick because of COVID pandemic, it is going to affect the older people, and whatever people it affects, the burden of taking care of them usually falls with women, and that is another added burden for them, and it is also a risk for them. In addition to this, if you look at the ASHA workers or health workers, they are basically women, and their rights are violated because when these people go to their go to households in order to count the COVID patients that are there, in order to take a survey about the COVID patients that are there, these people are basically being attacked, and this is not a good turn, and this is hurting their morale as such. That is another problem that they are facing. And in addition to this, there is a situation of domestic violence and an increase in domestic violence since the COVID lockdown because the men are staying at home. Apparently this is creating a spike in domestic violence. In such a situation, because of all these challenges, we are supposed to create conditions in which the challenges are properly handled. Firstly, we have to set up domestic violence shelters. By doing so, we should be able to provide women with support if they need. If women are basically facing domestic violence, these shelters should provide them with accommodation, first thing. And also domestic violence cells, which include police personnel, should be able to go there and provide some amount of redress to the women. That is first point. And secondly, we should take into account the care work that is being done by women. So whenever the schemes are launched, whenever the schemes based money is given out to a family, it should be given in the name of the women. So whatever cash transfers, credits, loans, etc., that are being given to a family, it has to be given in the name of the women. It has to be targeted at women, so that women will have some amount of better social standing because of higher money they will have at the disposal. In addition to this, they should be provided with health insurance, they should be given paid sick leave, and so on. So taking all these measures is important to handle this particular situation, and especially handling the extra burden which women are facing because of COVID pandemic. So this is what the article is trying to tell us. Now let's move on to the next article. So the title of the present article is India remains on US priority watch list. The syllabus connection for the same and the issue and dimension has been listed here for your benefit. Please have a look. Now let's look into the discussion. So this article basically says that India is still in the priority watch list of the United States, and this priority watch list is basically a group which is created under the special 301 report. We need to have a brief background about the special 301 report in order to understand this article better, so we will do the same. So what is the special 301 report? Special 301 report is a measure by which US identifies countries. And what kind of identification it does? It identifies countries whose intellectual property norms are not in line with the interests of America. Like for example, if there is a particular country and its IP norms are against American products as such, then it is going to categorize this particular country as either priority watch list country or priority foreign countries. And by doing so, USA will be able to take measures in order to handle the situation better, in order to make sure that that particular country's IP norms are changed or modified in such a way that US goods will be able to travel into that country. So this is the basic essence of special 301 report, and this special 301 report basically gives a list of two kinds of countries, as in there are two groups of countries that are basically created by the special 301 report. We need to know about these things. So the first group of country is called the priority watch list countries, and under this particular subgroup, whatever countries are there, they basically have a decent amount of IP norms, but they are at loggerheads with USA as such, as in they do not totally hurt the US products as such, but then they create some amount of disturbance or obstacles to USA products to come into these countries. And certain examples of these countries are India, and in addition to this, you also have Algeria, Argentina, Chile, China, etc. etc. So whenever a particular country gets placed in priority watch list, US follows the policy called the carrot policy. By using the carrot policy, USA will develop good amount of relations with this particular country. USA will politely convey the problems that it is facing because of the IP norms in that particular country, and it will help that particular country, be it through funding or through training or through capacity building, to make sure that the IP regime in that particular country becomes favorable for USA. That is one way in which USA handles the situation, and this is basically coming under priority watch list countries. Now there is another category. There is another category under special 301 report, which we call it as priority foreign countries. In these countries, the IP norms or the intellectual property norms are in such a way that they are not in line with USA at all. That is, they are basically detrimental to the interest of the USA. In such a situation, what USA does, USA basically identifies these countries, and it uses this policy of stick. It uses the policy of stick to force IPR reforms in those countries. By forcing IPR reforms in those countries, be it through trade sanctions or approaching WTO dispute resolution mechanism or through other means, by taking any of these measures, USA will be able to open up that economy, and by doing so, it will make sure that USA products will be able to reach that particular economy. So on one hand, you have the priority watch list countries for which USA adopts the policy of carrot, and on the other hand, you have priority foreign countries in which USA adopts the policy of stick. So this is related to the special 301 report, the background of special 301 report. In this context, we have to understand why India is still in this particular special 301 report. Is India's IP architecture really that bad? No, that is not the case that our article tries to tell us. And even if we look at the IP architecture that is there in our country, there are several measures that are there in different laws to make sure that the intellectual property is protected adequately. Okay, so what are the different laws that are there? India doesn't have probably a single patent law, but it has several laws in which patent norms are embedded. Like for example, we have Trademarks Act, we have Geographical Indication Act, we have Indian Patents Act, we have Copyrights Act, and so on. We have different acts for different products that are there, and we make sure that the intellectual property is properly protected. But certain measures that have been taken by India have not been in American interest, that is in relation to the pharmaceutical products that are there. We will understand the situation a bit better. So what these companies in USA usually do is, after a particular period of time, after the patent expires of a particular drug, they basically make small changes in the drug and claim that it is a new drug, and they claim that it is a new drug and call for an extension of patent. Now this is definitely not in the interest of India, because India wants good drugs at cheaper prices, and if patent is basically given and the royalty goes, and then the price of the particular drug is going to be very expensive. So in that case, what India has been trying to do is, you cannot make certain minor changes and call it as a new drug and claim for patent. You have to make sure that there is significant change, there is an increase in efficacy of the drug, only then I will grant you patent. That is what we have said using our Indian Patents Act, and this is not liked by USA as such, and which is why India is basically being placed in the special 301 report, because India is not opening itself to the USA's pharmaceutical companies or pharmaceutical products in the manner which USA wants it to. So that is one reason that has been given as to why India has been placed in the special priority watch list. One, that reason being the way in which India handles the pharmaceutical patents. The second reason that has been given is the way in which India gives the manufacturing licenses. The way in which India basically gives the manufacturing licenses, there is no transparency related to it. Like for example, India gives out manufacturing licenses apparently to certain companies, but it does not give to certain companies, and it does not give out the reasons why it is giving these licenses to so and so company and not to so and so company. This is probably a violation of transparency, and this is what this article claims, that this is one of the reasons why India is also placed under special 301 report. Also, in addition to this, there are high customs duties on medical devices and on information and communication technologies, and also we have poor copyright laws apparently, and these are all the reasons that have been cited by the priority watch list. I use the word apparently because India feels that it has strong IP laws, but USA feels that India does not have strong IP laws, which is why I use the word apparent, because this is the view of the US special priority watch list. This is the view of the special 301 report, which is why I am listing it that way. So one reason is India's patent norms in relation to pharmaceuticals, in relation to the manufacturing licenses, in relation to the high customs duties on medical devices, and the high information and communication technology taxes that we give. So because of all these reasons, American firms are not able to establish themselves in India. American products are not able to penetrate the Indian market, which is why America feels that India should be under priority watch list. That is what this article is trying to tell us. Now let's move forward to the next article. So the title of the last article is Study on China Dams Brings the Brahmaputra into the Focus. The syllabus connection, the issue and the dimension has been listed here for your benefit. Please have a look. Now let's move on to the discussion. So this article is basically related to the way in which China constructs dams in its country, and a particular US study has basically talked about the impact of Chinese dams on Mekong River as such, and this negative impact can be replicated in relation to Brahmaputra is what this article is trying to tell us, because of which India has to be very cautious. So what happened to the Mekong River? In relation to Mekong River, China has basically constructed several dams in the upstream of the Mekong River. But because of the construction of these dams, the lower Mekong region is basically facing problems. Like for example, in the upstream we have what we call the Yunnan province, and this Yunnan province has received a good amount of rainfall in the previous year. Despite this, the lower Mekong region has not been getting enough water, because of which it has faced a severe drought. And this shouldn't have been the case because Mekong is a very big river. It should have been able to supply water to both Yunnan and also the lower Mekong region. Because water was inundated, as in because water was stopped because of the different dams that have been constructed, be it for power projects or infrastructure projects or irrigation, water has not been available for the lower Mekong region. So this is a serious crisis that has been arising in the Chinese lower Mekong region. And especially if you go into the lower Mekong region, there are several other countries that are are dependent on this lower Mekong river, like Thailand and so on. These countries are facing problem, and this problem is basically what could replicate in relation to India. In order to understand this, we have to understand that particular river, which basically is related to both India and China. What is it? It is Brahmaputra. So Brahmaputra starts from China and it flows into India. It starts in the Tibet region, it flows into India. And if at all China wants to construct dams in the upstream of Brahmaputra, if it wants to construct dams in the upstream of Brahmaputra, it is definitely going to create a problem in the downstream region, and India is going to basically face the brunt of the same because India is present in the downstream region. Now the question is it really a theoretical fear, or is it happening on ground? The article says that it is really happening on ground because if you look at the dam building activity on Brahmaputra by China, in 2015 China operationalized its first hydropower project at Zangmu. This is on Brahmaputra. And also it has been constructing several other dams on Dagu, Xiexu and Jiacha and so on. So China is trying indeed to build a lot of dams on the Brahmaputra area, on the Brahmaputra upstream region, and this is going to create a lot of problem to India in the long run. Sure, India has relayed its fears, as in India has relayed its concern to China, but China is not taking these into account, is what this article is trying to signify to us. In addition to this, should India really worry if China is basically constructing dams on the upper stream of Brahmaputra? Should India really worry? On one hand, India should worry because there is a good amount of water which flows from that region to India. But also, if you look at the sources of Brahmaputra, you have 35% of the sources of Brahmaputra in India itself. Like for example, there are several other tributaries which join Brahmaputra and provide water to Brahmaputra. These tributaries are there in India itself. So 35% of the water that comes into Brahmaputra is within India itself. So there is also a reason to be positive. There is also a reason to be positive because China can't come into India and construct dams on these particular rivers, right? So whatever dams it can construct, it is only going to construct in its territory, and that is in the upstream region. But in the downstream region itself, we have as high as 35% of the sources of Brahmaputra in India itself through different rivers that are there, be it Dihang, Dibang, etc., whichever they are. In addition to this, do we have a water sharing agreement with China? No, that is actually a problem. We are supposed to have a water sharing agreement with China. That is something this article signifies towards. In addition to this, we have to repeatedly raise the issue with China so that China basically acts on it in a reasonable manner. In addition to this, we are also supposed to help each other to harness the potential of Brahmaputra for the common benefits of the people of that particular region. That is what this article is trying to tell us. So this is the discussion for the day. Thank you for your participation. I will meet again.